Hi, I'd like to share some ideas that helped me score 2,978 points a few days ago, only 6 days after my first game of Woodoku. Be patient. It took me over 3 hours to complete my game. That means it's fine to only play one game a day, or even only place a few pieces each day. The app lets you exit and continue the game when you open up the app again. So if you're feeling tired, exit the app. Try and forget about the score and just enjoy the beauty and complexity of the game. That will help relieve some of the pressure. And if you really want to concentrate well, try and minimize distractions. If you see a good move, look for a better one. And make sure you look at the whole board, every column, every row, and large square to find all those possible candidate moves. And when you compare them, make sure you reject the ones that create the largest weaknesses, and then you'll have less to calculate. Practice working out where you're going to place all 3 pieces before you place the first, and that will improve your visualization skills. It will get easier. You can take screenshots and even draw possible moves on the screenshot if that helps you. And a wooden Sudoku board could be used to look at complex variations. Both can be used to analyze your game afterwards, and you'll learn as much from the good moves as you will from the bad ones. Practice makes perfect, and the more tactical positions that you see and analyze, the better you'll get at them. And don't forget how important move order is. So for combinations, often the last piece you need to place is the one that is in all the boxes, columns and rows you're trying to complete. And for streaks, try and think about all the small squares that will be either empty or filled after each successive completion, and the final positions that will result. Don't give up when all seems lost. Keep hope alive. And if you do make a mistake, don't beat yourself up about it and end up making 5 more mistakes. And if you have no idea what to do, the move that feels right is probably best. So trust your instincts. That subconscious mind of yours has been working on the problem too. Some strategies that help me are filling up the edges and large corner squares first, and avoid completing them if you have a choice of completions, because once you've completed them, they're the hardest areas to fill up again. Try not to create any isolated small squares or areas, and if you do, work really hard at trying to release them by performing completions around them. Leave space for the large pieces, particularly the long diagonals, and keep a record of which large pieces are causing you problems in your games, and then you'll prepare for them better. All the high-scoring games that preceded this game, between 1500 and 1900, for me, ended with a long diagonal. Make your own luck. Try and leave space for the greatest variety of shapes that will help you complete a completion. And now let's see how these principles help me score 2,978 points. I'll be referring to the large squares as numbers from 1 to 9, and the small squares as if they were on a slightly larger chessboard with one extra column I and one extra row 9. So here squares G3 and H3 are unoccupied. To save time trying to name all the pieces, I'll sometimes refer to them as left, middle or right, based on their position at the bottom of the screen. So here's the first challenge on the way to scoring 2978. And if you want to pause the video now to have time to work out the best moves, okay, so this is a simple combination completing both box 3 and 6 at the same time by placing the left and right pieces first and the middle piece last. If you got the move order wrong in this case, because it's a combination involving just 2 boxes, you would end up with a streak. Getting the move order wrong when you have more than 2 boxes or when there are any lines involved would probably have more serious consequences than just losing a few points. Later on, I'll sometimes use the colour grey for isolated squares or areas, and blue when the move order for all 3 pieces is important. Okay, so this position is quite complex. If you want to pause the video to try and think of as many variations as you can and think of what you think is the best move, please do so. If you've thought of 5 variations, great. If you haven't and want some more time, then feel free to pause again. The first variation would be to place the left piece in the 9th box, achieving the most points with 1 move, but it has the huge disadvantage of completing column I, which then makes it very hard for you to complete boxes 3 and 6. And it goes against that principle I mentioned earlier of when you have a choice between completions, try not to complete edges. The next variation uses all 3 pieces for a double combo, completing row 5 and box 3. And this doesn't clear many squares from the board. Even a double streak would clear a lot more squares than a double combo. And here you're giving it the chance of a triple streak. The same problem for the next variation. It doesn't clear many squares from the board and leaves a very isolated first row and square on A2. So coming to the last 2 variations, both of which start with completing box 6. I chose one of those variations. This is the first, which I didn't choose and might be the best because it leaves a piece, small square, on D4, sorry, E4. As you can see, you can use either of the middle or the right pieces to complete box 3 or 6. And the only difference then between those variations is whether you leave a small square on E4 or E6. And leaving a square on E4, which is in line with a square on A4, kind of seems more sensible because in the future you might want to try and complete row 4. So this is the variation which I did choose, which of course again requires completion of box 6 first, and then once you complete box 6 you can complete either box 9 or 3 in either order. And then we come to the next position and our first long diagonal. So again, if you want to pause the video, try and think where you might place all 3 pieces, please do so. If you've managed to think of a couple of possible variations, great. If you haven't, you might want to pause the video and think a bit longer. The first involves completing the 5th large box with the middle and right pieces, but does leave you the problem of what to do with that long diagonal. So in my view, a better solution is to use all 3 pieces to complete column F. And the small squares that they leave behind are either on the edge or in line with other small squares. And it does lead me to think that perhaps another general strategical idea might be that if you have a choice between completing a column or row that goes through the center or the central large square 5 itself, it's probably a safer bet more often to complete the column or row. I have had a few instances of completing the central 5th square and it creating almost a giant hole surrounded by a wall of other small squares and requiring the exact shapes to fit in, and it can destroy a whole game. Again, see if you can come up with the best positions and move order for these 3 pieces, and if you like to pause the video now for a bit more thinking time. If you've seen 2 variations, great. If you haven't, you might want to pause for a bit more time. And if both those involve completions, great. If not, you might want to pause a bit longer. The first, in fact, both completions involve completing box 5 and column E. This is the first variation using all 3 pieces, of course placing the right piece last because that's the only piece which occurs in both box 5 and column E. I didn't choose this because the left piece leaves the small squares filled on B7 and C7, and it's quite nice to have a completely empty box 7 in case a big piece comes along. Looking at the variation I did choose, it does have the disadvantage of filling C3, which in theory should make it harder to complete box 1, but sometimes you've just got to weigh up pros and cons, and I just thought this was better overall. And as you can see from the next 3 pieces, it kind of worked out and I was really jammy, but then again it's still a low score, and at this stage of the game you quite often get small pieces. So again, if you want to pause for a moment, saying that the position for these pieces is pretty straightforward. There's 2 boxes, box 1 and 9, crying out to be completed with pieces, the left and right pieces, and the middle piece has a pretty natural home too. The little blue X's are just pointing out what got left behind in the previous combination. Which leads us on to the next position with our second long diagonal already. So if you want to pause the video and try and work out where you want to place all three and what move order, now is the time. So if you've managed to see a combination, great. If not, you might want to pause the video a bit longer. Placing the long diagonal and left piece first, and the middle piece last allows you to complete both box 2 and column D at the same time for a combination, and leads us to our third long diagonal. So again, pause the video, have a think where you might want to place all three pieces and in what order. Okay, if you managed to think of two possible completions, great. If not, you might want to pause a bit longer. First we'll look at is completing column G with the middle and the right pieces, but then that leaves you the problem of what to do with the long diagonal. I quite like it though, because you are completing a fairly sort of central line with it being column G. And then there's completing the 9th row with the long diagonal and the middle piece, which, looking back, I think that probably would have been my favourite move, but I chose to try and get the long diagonal in the left corner, thinking that it'd be quite nice in some ways to leave the fairly easy to complete row 9, and I'd got into the habit of thinking that it'd be nice to put long diagonals in corners when possible. Of course, you have to think where you're going to put the little right piece. It looks a bit silly up in the 7th box. Much better to cross it with the long diagonal and fill up box 1. Which then leads us to another position with yet another long diagonal. So if you want to pause your video and have a think what you might do here. So if you thought of two possible completions, great. So again, we've got the idea of completing column G, and this time, of course, the long diagonal can be placed quite nicely across where column G used to be. And I think perhaps that's probably the best use of all three pieces. There's also completing row 9, which is what I ended up doing, and here we've missed placing a few pieces. I didn't take any screenshots for I think I must have completed box 1 and then placed a square shape of 4. So now if you want to have a little think, pause the video again. So the first thing is the left piece and the right piece can only be fitted on the board in one position. So these two moves are forced. So you only need to really think about then what are you going to do with the middle piece. Putting it in box 3 is a bit silly, creates a horrible isolated square on H2. Even sillier in box 7, isolating 4 squares. Looks pretty good in box 6, but the best position is to cross it with the diagonal of 3, which is what I did. And the next couple of moves were pretty much forced, so I put a cross shape in boxes 2 and 3 with another shape in box 6, and then the diagonal of 3. Doesn't have anywhere else to go, which then leads us to a really complex position which I spent a long time thinking over, and in the end, I think because I was just so tired, made a mistake. So have a long think, or at least I'd recommend having a long think. If I had this position again, now I've got my wooden Sudoku board, I would definitely set it up on that to help me. I must say I've been pretty jammy with these 3 pieces. The board is so full that I really thought my game would be over quickly. Anyway, if you'd like to pause the video and have a good old think, if you manage to see a completion followed by a double combo, great. If not, you might want a bit more time. And the first variation we'll look at is using the right piece to complete box 6, followed by using the left piece to complete column C, which nicely makes room for the middle piece, and also clears or unlocks the G3 square, which is pretty good, but there's better. And that would be to first use the right piece to complete row E, then to place the left piece where row E used to be, making sure that, of course, that the I5 square is occupied once more. And then when you place the middle piece last, that will complete both column I and row 8 at the same time for a nice double combo. As you can see, the move order for all 3 pieces is critical. So for instance, if you place the middle piece first, which kind of looks good, completing column I and then allowing it to complete column C, you don't clear anything like as many squares. And in my case, I didn't fully see that when I was calculating ahead that you'd be able to place the left piece on row 5 once it was emptied. So I rather hurriedly put down the middle piece second rather than last, which as you can see ends up leaving me lots of pieces on column I, which would not be present if I'd got the move order right, as you can see from this position I set up on a wooden Sudoku board. So this is the position we've ended up with. So if you'd like to pause the video again and see what you think is the best positions for these 3 pieces and in what order they should be placed. So if you managed to see the quadruple combo, well done. If not, pause your video a bit longer. Now the first move to reject is just to place the middle piece in the 9th box to complete the column I. Not so bad as completing box 5 with the middle and right pieces, but by far the best is to go for a quadruple combo by placing the left and middle pieces first and the right piece last. I unfortunately didn't see the potential for the left piece to complete column C. So I ended up with a triple combo and then had to find a place for the square piece, the left piece, and had the annoyance of a few extra little squares on the C file. So we've missed off a few moves, but here we've been given two long diagonals, our fifth and sixth. The fifth I've already placed, so if you want to pause the video now and have a think where you might want to place the sixth. So the first clue is where I chose to place the fifth long diagonal. I could have placed it higher up from the D7 square to the G4 square, which looks really nice, but it then stops this sixth diagonal from being placed from C2 to F5. Of course, it could go a bit higher up, but then it wouldn't give you a chance to complete row 2 and column F. So then we come to our next position. If you want to pause the video and try and have a think where you might want to place these three pieces and in what order. If you've managed to think of a double combo, great. If not, pause the video and have a longer think. Okay, so first of all, we need to avoid the temptation to place the left piece first and place it last after the other two pieces to allow us to complete both column B and the second box at the same time. Which nicely opens up the board in time for three large pieces. So if you'd like to pause your video and have a think of where you would like to place them and in what order. If you've managed to think of two completions, great. If not, you might want a bit longer to think. Okay, there are two ways of completing the fifth row and also giving yourself a chance to complete the second row to release the trapped H1 square. The worst option is to try and complete the F column, which unfortunately traps the I8 square, and when you complete the F column it removes the F2 square, which then makes it harder to complete the second row and release the H1 square. So guess which one I chose? Yep, the worst option. Perhaps I didn't realise that the F2 square would be removed and wasn't too worried about the I8 square, but I really should have been, I think. Okay, and now we have three more large pieces, so again, if you want to pause your video and have a think where you might want to place them and in what order. Okay, if you've managed to think of a completion, great. If not, perhaps pause the video again and have another think. Okay, so using the middle and left pieces helps to complete the D column. Deciding where exactly to place the left piece is quite important, I think, and I think it's best to try and give you a chance to complete the C and G columns. And then where to place the right piece. The very obvious one would be the sixth box, but I think that would be a mistake because that traps the H6 square. So hopefully you saw that
completing column D makes a nice space for that cross, and in addition to that, it also continues to help you complete the C and E columns, which leads us on to the next set of large pieces, just for a change. So if you'd like to pause the video again, have a think where you'd like to place them and in what order. Okay, so the middle piece gives us a pretty straightforward combo by completing the C column and fourth box, and the right piece nicely completes the G column. But which one would you put on first? Does it really matter? Actually, it does. If you do the combo first, you get 10 more points. In terms of thinking where you would put the left piece, sometimes you just have to save yourself a bit of mental energy, and you can clearly see that there will be space, but it's pretty hard to work out where. But it is a lot clearer when you put down the other two pieces, and as you can see, it does nicely add to the D column, making it pretty close to completion. So again, if you'd like to pause your video, have a careful think this time where you would like to place these three pieces and in which order, because it's pretty complex and there are lots of possibilities. Okay, so if you have thought of a double combo followed by a completion, great, that's the ideal. There are quite a few other completions to consider in combos. The first to exclude really is just completing the central box followed by the the third row, just for a double streak. It misses out on the best sequence, as does this, which just gives you a combo to start with, and this, which is another way of getting a combo, placing the first, so the left piece last, doesn't complete the third row, because of course you've removed D3, and it also has the disadvantage of trapping the A8 square. So the best set of moves, which perhaps because I was tired, I didn't see when I was reviewing the game, but I did see when I was actually playing it, which is to place the middle and right pieces in that order to give you a combo involving the fifth row and fifth box, followed by completing the third row, and that clears by far the most squares. Leading to our next position. So again, if you'd like to pause the video and have a careful think where you'd like to place these. several options to consider. The first to exclude is just placing all 3 pieces in the centre, which doesn't achieve anything. Completing the E column does open up the top of the board a little bit, but completing the 8th box and putting the middle piece in that top left corner not only opens it up, but it means that the 7th box will be very close to completion. So if you'd like to pause your video and have a careful think. Again, several options, so you can go for a double combo that starts and then line up the right piece on row 4 to try and complete it. Another similar double combo involves just also trying to leave the 6th box close to completion, which is pretty good. I didn't go for the combo. I saw the opportunity to complete the 6th box outright with 2 of the pieces, which didn't seem too bad because the 7th box is very close to completion, and placing the right piece in the bottom left allows me to be quite close to completing the 2nd row, which is quite a nice idea. So we're just giving up on the idea of trying to immediately complete the 1st row and just completing the 2nd row to gain access to it. And we come to our next 3 pieces, so if you'd like to pause the video and have a think of what you would do. Okay, so the left and right pieces have pretty obvious places to give you a nice combo, followed by a completion of the 2nd row, leaving you just to consider where to put the long middle piece. I think putting it in the centre perhaps closes off too many long diagonals and goes against the principle of trying to fill up the edges first. Looking back, I would now favour putting it in the top right to help complete the 9th box, but I chose to put it a little bit lower, right next to the I1 square. Okay, unfortunately we've missed a few moves, but if you'd like to pause your video now and think where you'd like to place these. And we've come across our 7th long diagonal. It's been over 400 points since we saw our 6th. And there's a nice easy combo involving the 4th box and 5th row, and making sure you use the right piece to complete the 5th row rather than the left piece, because the left piece goes better in the 3rd and 6th box. So again, if you'd like to pause your video and think where you'd like to place these. Okay, so it's fairly straightforward to complete rows 3 and 4 with all 3 pieces. And in the next position, I've already placed a cross and shown with a red line 3 pieces left over from the previous round. So where would you like to place these 2 pieces now? Pause again. And the first option would be to complete row 7. But row 7 is only 5 little squares in length. and it makes more sense to complete the longer column D, and there's a lovely position in box 1 for the middle piece. And in the next position I've already placed a horizontal 4, so I'd like you to think where to place the remaining 2 pieces, and was I correct in where I put that horizontal 4? Okay, and in this diagram there's a little mistake. The right piece should be coloured in red, because of course to get the combo you need to make sure you place the right piece after the horizontal piece. Now the idea behind me placing the horizontal piece on the second row was because I was trying to avoid completing the whole of the first row, which would then be the hardest to fill. Or saying that, what I should have done is place it on the third row and complete that. And the left piece goes nicely up in that top right hand corner. So now we've got 3 large pieces. So if you'd like to pause the video and have a think where you'd like to place those. So here's where we see the disadvantage earlier of placing that horizontal piece on the second instead of the third row. If we had put it on the third row, we could have completed the first box with the right piece now, and then completed the 5th box with the other 2 pieces. So we have to look for other options. So there's completing column E, which looks pretty good, but I went for a different option. Completing box 5 and leaving row 3 almost completed. Almost trying to, perhaps I was trying to erase the mistake of leaving those small squares on A3 and B3 by placing the horizontal in the wrong place. Which then leads us to another position. So if you'd like to pause your video and have a think where you might want to place them. So this was the best I could see, getting a nice combo with all 3 pieces, completing the E file and 9th box, making sure to place the middle piece last, of course. And if you'd like to pause your video again and think of the best moves for this position. Okay, completing row 3 is fairly straightforward with the 2 diagonals of 3, which just leaves you to decide where to place the right piece. Once row 3 has been cleared out, it's easier to see there's actually a 3rd possible place for the right piece, but the ones on the right still look a lot better because aiming to complete the G file, I plumped for the lower one. Now if you'd like to pause your video again and have a think what you'd want to do here. Okay, so the left piece goes where we could have put the previous identical piece to complete the G file, and that just leaves us with 3 options for the right piece and a couple of options for the middle piece. Quite hard to see one of the options for the middle piece which is where of course the G squares used to be, which will be cleared when you place the left piece. Okay, look, I think the right piece is probably better on the top position on the edge, which is where I put it, and going against the rule of trying to fill at the corners first, I think the middle piece is best used to try and complete the F file. So again, if you'd like to pause your video and think of the best moves for this position. Okay, there are two completions up for grabs, the C file and F file. Completing the F file second allows you to get a streak and 10 extra points. Of course, 3 squares in the bottom right corner will be isolated by this. Okay, if you'd like to pause your video and try and think where you might want to place these 3 shapes, we have our 8th long diagonal. The best option would be to complete the 3rd row, opening up that right corner and to try and release those 3 squares we've just isolated. A not as good option, but still reasonable, would be to complete the 6th box. And what did I do? I missed both options and was left with the problem of what to do with the long diagonal. So if you'd like to think where I might put it, several places, none of which look particularly good. I chose the low one. And if you'd like to pause your video again, have a think where we might put these pieces. Okay, so there's a nice combo available by completing the 6th box and column G with the left piece. And there are 2 other completions up for grabs, either the D file or the 2nd box. Doing the combo first, and then one of the completions gets an extra 10 points compared to doing one of the completions first. So I lost out because I placed the right piece completing the 2nd box first, but yeah, it's only 10 points. And when placing the cross, I had a couple of choices. Perhaps the lower one might have been better. It certainly looks better now. And if you want to pause the video again and have a think where we might want to put these 3 pieces. Our 9th long diagonal. Okay, so the best move is to get a combo by completing the 5th row and 5th large box, making sure to place the right piece last. Not so good is just to complete the 1st row or just the 7th row, which is what I did, clearly missing the combo and leaving me with a task to try and find a good place for the long diagonal. So if you want to have a think where I might have placed that. Quite a few different places, none of which look good. I chose the one closest to the bottom left corner, which does isolate the A2 and A3 squares. So if you want to pause again and have a think of what you might do with these three pieces. So there are a couple of completions. The first row and the fifth box. I think the middle piece is best placed up in the top right corner, just in case a long diagonal comes along, because there are a few squares on the left side of the board that might suit a long diagonal. I'm not totally sure where I did put it, because I missed a few screenshots and a few moves. So the next one we have is where to place this long horizontal of 5. It fits nicely on the top, on the edge. And if you want to pause and have a think where you might place these three pieces. Hopefully you managed to resist the temptation just to go straight for the double combo by placing the left piece in the box 7 and place the middle piece first to ensure you got a triple combo instead of just a double combo. And it's not just the points, it's also clearing that C file. And the right piece beautifully goes in box 3, leaving only one small square for it to be completed. So if you want to have a think of where these three pieces might go, so there's a nice combo involving the G file and third large box. You have a choice of how to complete the G file at the top. Personally, I think it's best to use the left piece and use the right piece instead to fill up the B4 square, aiming to complete the B column and release the 3 trapped A squares, A1, A2 and A3. I think I either missed this or was very focused on the idea of getting the left piece into the corner, because once you complete the G file, it clears the G9 square so that the left piece can fit really nicely in the top right corner of box 9. So if you want to pause your video again and have a think of what you might do with these three pieces. So there's a nice completion of the I file with the middle and right pieces, taking care not to put the left piece in the wrong place in box 2, which would prevent the middle piece going in box 3. So in this position I've already placed the right piece in the wrong place, which prevented me from completing column G. Anyway, try and think where I should have placed these two pieces. The left piece goes nicely in box 5, and there are 3 reasonable places for the middle piece. I chose the bottom one. So if you'd like to pause your video again and try and think of where to best place these 3 pieces. So one option would be to complete box 5 with the middle and the right pieces, and then you'd have a choice of 3 different positions for the left cross piece. Alternatively, you could complete row 5 with the right piece, and row 7 with the left and middle piece. In fact, that can also be achieved swapping around the left and right pieces. So I'm not totally sure what I did, because I unfortunately missed a few screenshots. So we're in a position where we just have 2 pieces to find a home for. So if you'd like to pause the video and think where you would like to place them. The board's getting pretty full now after quite a few mistakes. So the fairly obvious best moves are to complete row 7 with both pieces, which I completely missed. I instead placed the right piece in what seems like a nice home, and was left then with 3 very awkward choices for the middle piece, none of which are any good. And we're now in a position where for the first time we can't place one of the pieces. But if you want to pause the video and decide what you might do. So this is a really jammy position. If you've seen a triple combo followed by a double combo, great. If not, you might want to pause and think a bit longer. Placing the right piece in the 5th box first, then the left piece in the 8th box gives you a triple combo involving the E and F columns and 8th large box. Clearing the 8th large box makes space for the middle piece to then complete both the 9th large box and the H file for a lovely double combo immediately after, which clears a huge number of squares. Still leaves the problem of the A1, 2 and 3 trapped squares and the B4 trapped square. But if you'd like to pause now and have a think what you might want to do with these 3 pieces. One option would be to complete row 5. Another would be to complete row 6. Each of those presents the problem of what to do with the diagonal of 3. And then there's completing column F, which there are several ways. The way I like the best is to have the diagonal of 3 start on the F1 square, because when you complete the F column it will disappear and there'll be nothing else added to the first rank, the first row. So you're not then adding extra isolated squares. Unfortunately, I created 3 more isolated squares on C1, 2 and 3. So if you'd like to pause the video again and have a think what you'd like to do. When I reviewed this game, this double combo seemed quite obvious, completing the D column and the 5th row with all 3 pieces and leaving the middle piece, of course, till last, as that occurs in both. The huge advantage of completing the 5th row is it gains access to the B4 square, and once you've completed either the 4th row or the 4th big box, that gives you access to all 6 of the trapped squares in box 1. Of course, completing the D column does also give you access anyway to the trapped C squares, but gaining access to the trapped A squares is really should be the priority. So in the game I chose to complete the 6th row, clearly missing the combo. So if you'd like to see what you might do with the remaining 2 pieces, at this stage perhaps my preferred idea would be to try and use the right piece to help complete the 5th row to gain access to that critical B4 square. Quite a subtle idea, and of course the middle piece goes nicely in the top right hand corner. In the game I went to complete the D column, which is more obvious, and there were 2 ways of doing that. So if you look back at the original position, you can see how clearing the 6th row allows then completion of the D column. So this position just shows how the placement of those 3 pieces has led to this new position with 3 new large pieces for you to consider. So again, if you'd like to pause the video and try and think where you might want to place them. Okay, so the best option is completing column 3 with the middle and left pieces, and then the right piece can either go in the top right corner or in box 2, having cleared the E3 square. It's perhaps easier to see that placing it in box 2 helps to complete the F file once you've actually completed the E file. Okay, if you'd like to pause the video and have a think where you might not want to place these 3. Okay, it would be very tempting to put that square right piece in box 2, wouldn't it? Better than that would be completing column F, followed by
row 7. So there's a slight mistake in this. I could have coloured the box in green as well. The main thing is that the cross can't be placed until you've completed the F file, of course. So if you'd like to pause the video again, 3 large shapes, and have a think where you might want to place these. So by far the best, I think, is completing row 5, which unlocks the B4 square. Not so good is completing column G, and probably the worst is completing box 8, which I went for. Having completed box 8, it's clearer to see that actually the middle piece can go in back to box 8, which is what I did. So if you want to pause your video again and think where you might want to best place these nice little pieces. So I must have been really tired because I missed this straightforward completion of box 4, which would have solved all the problems on the board and unlocked those trapped A squares. Instead, I chose to complete the 5th row. Which does unlock the B4 square, but is nowhere near as good. So if you'd like to pause the video again and have a think where you might want to place these pieces. Okay, the first thing I'm sure you looked at is whether you could complete the B file, the B column. And unfortunately it doesn't look like you can, at least I can't see a way. So there's completing the C file, which is fairly straightforward. And there's the other option is to complete the row 6, which is what I chose. And if you'd like to pause the video again and have a think what you'd like to do in this position. Okay, so one option would be to complete the 4th row. But once you've placed the middle piece, you've locked up that bottom left corner again, and you're struggling to find a place for the cross. So far better is completing the B file. Which I'm glad to say I did see for a change. Of course, once you've completed the B file, it's easier to see that you can put the middle piece on the B file. Low down would clearly be terrible because you just lock up the A1 to 3 square again. Wherever you place it, you're going to isolate a small square, and I'm not really sure which is best, but I plumped for putting it on the left side. So if you'd like to pause your video again and have a think where you might want to place these pieces. So one option would be just to complete box 8. Leaving a chance to complete the C file, and that's what I chose. So if you'd like to pause the video again and have a think what you do here. So the best and rather obvious moves are just to complete the C file, then placing the other two pieces down so that you complete the third row. So instead, I chose to complete box 5, which unfortunately, so I should have mentioned actually that previous option was a combo, of course, completing box 7, and by instead going for completing box 5, I prevented myself from placing the final piece in that crucial C9 square. I'm not sure how I missed that, and it goes to show when you're tired, you can miss anything. And if you do a careful review of your games, you'll probably be shocked how much you miss. So again, if you want to pause your video and have a think what you'd like to do here. So one option would be completing the third row, which makes room for the middle piece nicely, and it leaves you 3 options to place the left piece. Probably best would be over on the right hand side. Far better, which amazingly I managed to see despite my previous poor moves, which is to complete rows 3 and 4 by first placing the middle piece. Quite crucial. If you make the mistake of placing the left piece first, you wouldn't get to complete both rows. And then of course once you've completed both rows, then you have a nice space for the right piece. So if you'd like to have a careful think what you would do here. Okay, so here there's a chance to complete box 7 and row C, column C, leaving the cross in the centre. Not many, couldn't really see any other options. So at least I got to do that combo in the end. But it still leaves a pretty constricted board. So if you want to think where you want to place these 3 pieces, and you already know what score I got to, so you know that I'm coming towards the end. The accumulation of too many mistakes, or rather missing things. Okay, so completing row 7. Seems like pretty much the only option, and that's what I did. And once you've done that, in fact, it's easier to see an extra place for the left piece, which kind of sneaks into that, half into that 5th box. And last of all, we come to the final position, 3 pieces of 5, and straight away I could see that I wasn't going to be able to complete anything or place all 3. So I just chose a couple of them to put down, and that was the end of the game. So I guess to summarize, it's always worth reviewing your games. You'll probably see far more mistakes and find many opportunities that you missed than you realize. And in terms of strategies, try to minimize creating weaknesses, really work hard at eliminating weaknesses, and take time to spot all the possible tactics that are available to you.